This is the voice of Bold Business Radio, and I am your host, Jessica Dewell of Red Direction. You're listening to Program 17, The Freedom of a Leader. It's our responsibility to think. Depending on the situation, we're asked to evaluate a situation, and other times we're told exactly what is wanted of us and how we're to get it done. So unless we're given step-by-step instructions, though, we still must review and assess and decide how to complete a project. Our ability to think is part of what gives us freedom. The freedom to choose and the freedom to learn. To have freedom, we must know what we want. So as a business leader, we also then must have an awareness, an understanding, a willingness to know and to practice thinking that will allow us to be who we are, playing all in, and understanding that cracks and crevices that crop up that allow miscommunication, complication, and drama to creep in, that awareness that we bring is the first step to being able to solve, remove, resolve those things. When miscommunication and complication, maybe even drama, when they creep in, if we're not careful, we lose our ability to be present. We lose our ability to have intention. And it doesn't matter the situation we're in. So when we think about freedom, we're thinking about intention, and we're thinking about thinking. After this, we'll be right back with Les Dossey.
Welcome to the Voice of Bold Business, the show that provides everything smart leaders need to evaluate situations, build relationships, and create solutions. Jessica Dewell candidly talks about the skills necessary to build tenacity and do more with less. And now, here's Jessica.
Les, I am so glad you are back on the Voice of Bold Business today.
It's fun to be back, Jess.
The co-hosts of this show, they're bringing their expertise, and they are talking about what they do in the context of what it means to be a leader today with me. And I love that because these are people that I know and that I trust and that have seen success and that I look up to and have something to learn from, not only when we talk on the shows, but out in the world as well. And so, Les, I would love for you to take a minute to tell people what you do and why you do it, and I think they'll see why you are a perfect fit for the Voice of Bold Business Radio.
Thanks, Jess. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about that. When I made the decision to become a coach back in 1998, I didn't really know what a coach was, and there weren't too many coaches out there coaching, at least that were visible, because coaching was not what it is today. Now there's coaches everywhere. So in the beginning stages, I coached anybody who would let me ask them questions and give them advice, and primarily professionals and small business owners and folks like that. And then after a couple of years, I decided that I wanted to sort of narrow my focus and define a niche that I could work in. And so I started doing sales training through Sandler Training, and I was primarily working exclusively with salespeople. And I learned a lot during that experience. And it taught me a lot about the needs in the marketplace. And after doing that for 3.5 years, then I decided that I would just coach CEOs and small business owners. And in the beginning, it was really an attempt, I guess, to immerse myself in what the marketplace was looking for through the eyes of CEOs and small business operators. And then after working with several fairly large clients, I made another decision that I only wanted to work with entrepreneurs and a specific kind of entrepreneur. And so today, all these years later, my primary focus is on helping really 3 kinds of entrepreneurs. The entrepreneur who's at my stage in life, they're in their 50s, maybe what they've already done has been successful, and now they're ready to make a transition, and they don't know what that transition is. They may be looking to make an exit from what they've done, and start something brand new, or they may be looking to sort of reinvent themselves within what it is that they're currently doing. And so they need to get kind of rejuvenated. And by rejuvenated, what I mean is that they approach their future the same way they did when they first became aware that they wanted to be a business owner or an entrepreneur. If you remember yourself, what it was like in the very beginning stages, the levels of enthusiasm and ambition and energy and freedom that you felt when you first started your own thing is completely different from what you feel now, probably. And so what I found is that a lot of these folks are kind of weighted down, everything that has happened, and they need sort of a restart to get rejuvenated. And so my focus is really on entrepreneurs who are very ambitious and want to do something bigger and better in their future than anything that they've done in their past.
It's a perfect setup. It sums up a little bit in terms of the transition and setting the stage for this change from the first two shows that we did, as well as what we're talking about today, which is taking this concept of clean thinking even deeper. So I want to know more about this concept of clean thinking. Tell us the attributes of what clean thinking is.
There's a great article that Tim Horton wrote. It's on a blog called Wait But Why. Wait But Why.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about Elon Musk, and it talks about the secret sauce that makes Elon Musk so effective as an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't really have language to communicate this until I read this article and understood that it's actually a thing. And what Tim discovered after interviewing Elon and writing this very, very long article about it is that Elon reasons from first principles. So when he sees a challenge or an opportunity, instead of reasoning like most people do from analogy and metaphor and from rules of thumb and educated guesses and from stereotypes and dogma and doctrine, Elon says, what is actually true about this challenge or about this opportunity that we can be relatively certain of? And that requires it's hard. It requires quite a bit of effort to sort of sift through what you know and what you're being told to identify those things that you're relatively certain are true, and then to build up from there or to reason up from there. And so clean thinking, in a way, is very much that. It's taking what you know and it's challenging all your assumptions and all your certainties to sort of sift out the things that may be incomplete or maybe false that could be holding you back. So let me give you one example from my own life.
Mm-hmm.
And once I cleaned this up, then it liberated me and my freedom was restored and my effectiveness expanded and so on. So early in my career, my very first true formalized or professionalized entrepreneurial venture, I was 20 years old and I had immediate success. We just took off like a rocket and it became overwhelming. I was young. I was in many ways very naive, but I had a pretty masterful skill set and I was able to be very, very successful. And I built a team around me, but it just became more than I could handle on my own. And not having a business background necessarily and not necessarily having a depth of knowledge about how to put together an organization and make it work, I did the first thing I thought was the right move, and I brought in a partner, somebody who I had worked with before that I thought possessed the skills and the attitude that I needed in order to sort of help carry, half of the effort. And so in the beginning stages, it worked really, really well, and we were a good team. But then I started noticing little red flags, and to make a long story short, I ended up becoming frightened of this person. And I won't go into the things that he did, but they made me think that he may have been sociopathic. And so I, because of fear, put together an exit strategy, and I made a very swift exit. The lesson that I took from that was that partnering was a bad idea. only that was not a complete lesson. And I suffered in business because of that for about 2 decades until I was able to complete the lesson, until I was able to figure out that partnering isn't bad. It's just that you have to do your due diligence up front, and you have to sort of set all the expectations up front so that downstream, when things happen and the challenges arise, everybody knows how to behave, and it's been formalized so that the exits or the mitigation or the compromise is made much easier.
Very interesting. So I want you to finish your thought, because I have 2 failed partnerships, but I came at it from a completely different perspective and still came away with what I would call a lesson that I learned from going forward.
Once I got the complete lesson and realized that partnering is really a really good idea as long as it's done properly, then my next partnership ended up being very successful. And when it was time for us to part ways, it was done very amicably and it was done equitably, and we were able to continue and maintain our friendship, and the relationship never suffered. It grew and expanded as a result. Now, that drives home my point that if I had reasoned about partnering or business from that first experience with that incomplete lesson, I made it to my 55th birthday never having learned that lesson and missed out on all the upside associated with having a properly fit partner in my life. I want to give you one more really, really quick example, what I mean by this, because I think it's relevant. You know, when I was 24 years old, Jess, my first son died in my arms. He was 5 years old. The words that I received from everyone around me were that, you know, that the grieving would continue the rest of my life, that the sorrow that I felt I would carry it with me the rest of my life, and that was just a wound that would never heal. Had I listened to everyone's opinions and accepted those as truth, I probably would not be able to have this conversation with you today,
right,
without getting all, you know, teary and just becoming an emotional mess. But I'm able to have this conversation with you because I figured out that it does not have to be true. You can overcome, you can be healed, you can clean up your thinking, in other words, and put that in the right place, in the right perspective, and define it the proper way so that you can move on into your future, not just free, but even more effective. Because when I think back on my son, he was with me for almost 5 years. It's not with sorrow and it's not with pain. It's with a lot of precious memories, a lot of really, really powerful moments that sort of transformed who I am as a man and as a friend and as a human being.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I mean when I say to clean your thinking. And as an entrepreneur, it's really important because there's so many things happening to us on a daily basis that if we don't process them fully, we end up with real sloppy thinking, and it makes it very difficult to capitalize on the future opportunities and to untangle and work our way around the challenges that we face. So clean thinking is vital to the health of a human being and to the health of an organization and its growth.
As you were speaking, and I was reflecting back on my experiences, I have good partnerships and I have bad partnerships in my past, and the 2 that failed, and they failed miserably, I'm using maybe lesson is a good word. Somebody told me that once. When you combine a blessing and a lesson together, you get blessings. I think that's always an interesting phrase. And this is really apt because, one, we both had skills, we both had the ability to do things, and our strengths complemented each other. I was more administrative, she was more sales-oriented to get clients. I could do one set of the jobs, and she could do the other set of the jobs, the tasks that were necessary, so that we could create even a more complete package for our clients. Well, what ended up happening was our longer-term goals and values did not align. And actually, I shouldn't say our longer-term goals and our immediate personal and professional values did not align. And so it fell apart. And when it fell apart fast. I didn't see it coming. I actually lost a lot of money. She actually took all the money out of our bank accounts and closed them down and disappeared. And I was like, oh, because one day she decided we just weren't going to work together, and that was that, and she was out. I was like, well, what are you going to do about that? And I could have been like you and said, oh man, I'm never going to do this again. But I went the other way around. I was like, oh, well, next time I can do this and this and this. So I learned some about partnerships, and I had another, good partnership, and then I had another failed partnership. And the second one, there was a lot of energy, there was a lot of chemistry, there was a lot of good intention, yet when it came down to the division of the tasks and the ability to get the things done, all of the tasks to get everything done fell to me. And while the other person had intention and a great big heart, they also didn't have anything else to give, and I got burnt out because I couldn't do it all fast enough for us to get money in the door. And we were equally investing in this thing. So that partnership also didn't work out, and I walked away from that one, and I was like, oh. And it took me to get to the point where I was like, this concept of planning, this concept of being all in, and this concept of what this relationship is going to look like was very clear to me, but for whatever reason, I was not on the same page, and the clarity that the other person had was not the same as mine. And so going forward, when I do collaborations or official partnerships or things of that nature, I always start from, what do I want from this relationship, and how do I want to show up? And I make sure that I communicate that and repeat that, and I ask a lot of questions so that I can find out how the other person sees the relationship and what all in means to them and how they want this to work, because it's only through that communication process that can actually make a productive, fruitful outcome.
If you don't manage expectations on the front end, then when things don't go as expected downstream, it becomes very difficult to work through, and most of the time it ends up in a rift that leads to an eventual separation or divorce. Yeah.
And business divorces or breaking up of partnerships is just as bad as a marriage failing or falling out with a best friend. They're really hard to recover from. And so when you were talking about wait, but why, article, which we will link to in the program notes, you were talking about some things, and I was also talking about some things that come the skills. The skills are, there's work to be done. There is effort. And if we do it up front, we have more certainty. Now, we can never get rid of all of the uncertainty out there, but we can be certain in why we're doing it and be very laser focused in the actions that we're taking toward that end, so that we have the best ability for the best outcome, the best ability for the best relationship.
I mean, the hardest job a leader has or an entrepreneur has is thinking.
Yeah.
The rest of it's fairly easy, but the thinking part is hard. So it's unfortunate that so many of us don't think. We, for whatever reason, I remember one stunning discovery that I made after having coached for about 10 years and asking, hundreds of people to tell me the last book that you've read. And most of the time when I asked that question, what do you think the answer was I got?
I haven't read a book in many, many years.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I get that answer too.
What a shame. Yeah. I mean, how is it that you're keeping up with what's happening in the marketplace? How is it that you're renewing your mind, that you're staying on the leading edge so that, you see what's coming and you know how to respond? How is it that you are developing new skills so that you can manage and lead and guide more effectively? And, it's just so that the act of thinking or the process of thinking or the responsibility for thinking is the hardest job we have as entrepreneurs and as leaders and as human beings. And it's one of the most neglected, unfortunately.
It is unfortunate. And one of the things that when leadership teams are working with me less, we end up instituting, and I do this too, I have thinking time. Every single week, I block out, I want to do more, but I've made a commitment and held the commitment of 3 hours in a 3-hour block once a week. I sit down and I'm not doing any tasks, and I'm not reviewing the business like in the official business reviews with reports. I'm sitting with how things feel. I'm sitting with what I know from the last meeting, and I'm looking at what the future is for Red Direction. And with that information sitting right there, it's almost like dreaming and daydreaming and going back to this effort, this thinking, this time and this space to go, well, are we on track or not right now? Does everything that I see and feel and experience sitting in this room at this time, does it align with the vision? Does it align with our 1-year business plan? Are we on track? Are we not? And without going into too much detail of looking at all these reports and kind of getting into the nitty-gritty, staying very high level and saying, so if we're not, what's the opportunity or what's the threat that we're facing? So I use thinking time to identify opportunities, to identify problems, and to just dream of other things that might be sitting there and waiting to be discovered, to be brought into some conversations, to be discussed more and evaluated to find the right time, or if they would, if they would work at all, and then the right time to start implementing them. And I think that that's a really big important thing for leaders to sit down as individuals and as a group and not get stuck in reports and not get stuck on having to justify what happened and all of that stuff, but being able to go, hey, this is the way that it is. This is what's been done. So what now? What next?
Vern Hernesh wrote the book Rockefeller Habits. In one of the chapters, he wrote this statement, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing the right thing right? The point is that asking those questions really helps to clarify what is and isn't working, and what you are and aren't doing right. It's not enough just to do what's right. You have to be doing what's right in order to get the result you're looking for. And the only way you can figure that out is if you take time for the hard work of thinking. Jess, you said something interesting in the beginning, in the opening of your response to what I said earlier. You said you take 3 hours once a week.
I have thinking time, and I sit there and I look at what's going on in the sense that I'm experiencing it and I'm feeling it, and I'm also going, this is the way that it is. So
you're feeling it.
I'm feeling it.
You're feeling it. So explain that a little bit more. Are you talking about you're using your intuition, or what do you mean?
Good. When you go through each day, and actually here's another thing that I help put structure and behaviors around for the companies that I work with, the leadership teams, is a lot of times everybody, they're like, yeah, it feels good, so we're going to keep doing what we're doing. Or, no, it doesn't feel so good, so we need to change what we're doing. But there's no reports, there's no data to back it up. That is not what I'm talking about. Is the momentum there, or is it lacking for me and my team? Do we have the abilities to get the thing done that we need to get done or not? So when I say feel, I'm really talking about the experience of holding the whole business in my head and just kind of taking a look at it. And I don't know if you want to look at it from I don't like to use the concept of a crystal ball, because I'm not trying to look for the future. I'm trying to just hold it in a capacity, maybe like the snow globes. You've got those beautiful little thing, some type of setting inside of a snow globe. You can just hold it and you can look at it. Well, pretend your whole business is inside that snow globe, and you're just looking at it and you're like, yes, I really like this right now, or no, I really don't like this right now. And then if you want to shake it around and you see all the pieces of the business as they're flying around in this landscape here, what are the feelings that come up? Because usually, we all have feelings, and we don't allow our feelings to guide some of our questions. We feel like we have to know everything. We feel like we have to have some concept and grasp of what's going on. Yet, sometimes it's worth letting it all go. it's worth looking at it from a clean slate, like you're an outsider in your own business. What would somebody that has never seen your business, what kind of questions would they ask you? Those are the types of things I'm talking about. And I know I've heard you use the phrase beginner's mind before. So I'm thinking, when I talk about think time, part of it is having that beginner's mind. And I would love for you to describe what you mean by a beginner's mind so that we can add some, not only context, but shape to this concept of just being curious.
I love the way that you described my question to your initial opening.
Okay.
That really made it clear and easy for me to wrap my head around. And I love the analogy of the snow globes. If you could be an eagle and fly over your marketplace,
yeah,
and see what's happening, what a great perspective, when most people are down in the weeds and only can see what's right in front of them. And so that's a great analogy, Jess. I think the challenge that we run into is that we become too certain about what is and what isn't. And a beginner's mind is taking the position that I don't know anything. Maybe nobody knows anything. And so how can I be open to the possibility that I need to learn something here and that I'm not holding on to anything that I currently know, so that I'm open enough to receive what I need to know in order to move forward? So that's sort of my definition of a beginner's mind. You can't take the position of a beginner's mind or begin with a beginner's mind if you're holding on to the analogies and the metaphors and the rules of thumb and the half-truths and unfinished lessons and the gaps in your understanding and so on. You have to literally make the decision that you're going to put yourself in a position to be a sponge, to empty yourself out, in other words, so that whatever lesson you need to know can make its way to you.
Yeah, because when we're full or we're quote unquote busy and we're taking all of these actions and activity all the time, there is no room for serendipity, if you will, the right article to come across the desk to be read, the right conversation to be had at the moment that actually sparks something and a direction to go explore about a problem that we're having somewhere in our life. I hear you.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing when that happens. The challenge that so many of us face, and I have been guilty of this myself numerous times, is that you use the word serendipity or the universe or whatever when an article crosses our desk or a phone call comes or we see a Facebook post or a LinkedIn article or wherever the information is coming to, and then you notice that there's sort of a theme associated with it. Instead of going, wait a minute, something is trying to tell me something. Something is trying to tell me something. And then taking that position of, I have a beginner's mind, I don't know anything, and maybe nobody else knows anything, and I want to learn what I need to know from this theme that I'm picking up on, because this probably is the answer that I'm seeking. It's probably the thing I need to transform this obstacle or this barrier into a new capability or into the stepping stones that'll lead to a bigger, better future for me and for my organization.
We have to take a side tangent because you have a friend in the background in your nature out there, and I want to know, is it a raven?
Yeah, I have a bunch of ravens. They're my favorite bird, and they're not pets. They just happen to live in the pine trees around my house. There must be, 50 of them. Every time I hear one, Jess, I'm 12 years old again, running through the fields of Dixon, Tennessee, just carefree, and it's just a wonderful thing.
Okay, everybody, I want you to listen up because we were talking about serendipity, and we're talking about this concept of being open and having this beginner's mind and being willing to make a space for the right information to come our way. And there are concrete ways to do this. It's almost like the age-old adage where the slower we go, the more we get done. There is something to be said for that. I wanted to repeat that because I think it's cool that they're your favorite. They're one of my favorite birds as well for how smart they are and how giving they are and how compassionate they are. But they also show up for me in the craziest, weirdest times. So every house that we have lived in, the last two houses, so the one I'm in now in Boulder and the one that I was in last in Woodinville, Washington, one raven would come by and just hang out. And it was the craziest thing. And that happens here in Boulder too. We have this great half of our electricity and wires are underground, and half of them are above ground. And we're at the place where they go from underground to above ground, and a raven will just kind of come sit on the top of that pole and just hang out sometimes, not all the time. And it's not like he lives close by or she lives close by, but this raven will come by once in a while. And I always make sure to take note, because for those of you who think about animal totems and the gifts that we are given just by the interactions that we have every day, ravens bring a sense of knowing with them. And so here we are, we're talking about being curious. We're talking about having a beginner's mind. We're talking about thinking about setting it all aside and looking at it as if we didn't know anything. And here comes this raven in the background, Les, that's like, yes, 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 make space, make space. That's what I heard it say. It's as it was talking, as you were talking, it was like it was echoing what you were saying. And so I wanted to stop and repeat it, because maybe that raven had a purpose for being in this part of the conversation.
I love it.
I think that's great that you have memories going way back. Well, okay, so we're talking about being curious, having this beginner's mind, and there are some concrete skills that we can develop to be able to do that. And from my experiences, both personally and professionally working with companies, is that having the ability just to observe, to just stop and observe with no judgment, and to have the courage not only to do that, but then to decide on an action. Those are two things that I think really are necessary as part of a beginner's mind. Would you add any skills to that, Les?
It's a muscle, Jessica. So if you practice letting go of, then you can get very good at letting go of.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't practice, then you're going to have a really hard time doing it. I said earlier that we, as a society, as human beings in general, tend to reason by analogy and metaphor and rule of thumb and conventional wisdom and our own experience. It's really a poor way to navigate your future, because your thinking is filled with all kinds of half-truths and untruths, and you end up missing out on a lot that life has to offer as a result. So it's like there is this sort of common belief out there that change is hard and that developing new habits is really hard. Well, it's only as hard as we make it. So if we look at the general population and say, yeah, it's hard because most people have a hard time, that is probably the truth. But it doesn't have to be hard for you if you'll take the position that it doesn't have to be hard or that it's not hard. The hardest part to it all is just making the dadgum decision that you're going to change. Once you make the decision, then it's very easy. And that's a muscle. That's a muscle. The more you practice exercising the muscle, the stronger the muscle becomes. And so you can change very, very quickly. You can develop new habits very, very quickly. You can break bad habits very, very quickly if you'll exercise the muscle. I think there is, and I can't cite the author of this quote. It says something to the effect of, and I'm probably going to butcher the quote a little bit, but you'll get the objective. The successful person of the 21st century will not be the person who can read and write and has a college degree. It'll be the person who can learn, unlearn, and relearn very quickly.
Yeah.
So this garbage that we just accept that what we hear and what we see is true, and that what the general population accepts is true, is real, is a trap. It's a big, giant, invisible wall that prevents many, many people, entrepreneurs and professionals and business leaders and our neighbors and ourselves from achieving all that we're capable of achieving. The key is to exercise those muscles, right? To exercise your thinking muscle, to exercise your letting go of muscle, to exercise your taking the position of a beginner's mind muscle. And if you just consciously, intentionally exercise those muscles, they become servants. They become capable of carrying the weight that you need them to carry.
Right, right. And all of that, and I love that, the letting go of, the beginner's mind, having that curiosity. There are two, and then the observation and the courage, just noticing, and then not only noticing what's around us, noticing how people are acting, what their body language is like, what the market is doing, what the news is saying, but then also noticing our response to those things will help us know what to set aside to be able to practice this muscle of a beginner's mind. And that takes courage. It really takes courage to step out of what we know and sit in something we don't know, that uncomfortableness. I don't know the exact author, and I will get it. And the quote is, "When the facts change, I change my mind." And so I love that quote because it's the willingness to accept that what's right isn't necessarily what's in front of me, or what's best in this situation or right for this situation might not have come up yet. And in this world of instant gratification, something that you were saying a little while ago reminded me that time is necessary. If we don't take the time, everything that we do to move quickly or to get a quick response or to do anything where we want an instant result, we're not giving ourselves a chance to expend some effort to find out if it's going to be the right result that we're going after.
What we really all want at our core, underlying all of our motivation, is to be free. I spend a lot of time analyzing what my true motivation is, so that it becomes a filter for me, right? So everything that comes at me now passes through this filter of, is this going to expand my freedom, or is it going to contract my freedom? Is this going to make me more effective, or is this going to make me less effective? If I approach my life and I approach the world and I approach my business and I approach new relationships with this filter, then it makes it very easy for me to say yes to the things that I believe will expand my freedom and no to the things that I don't believe will. So decision-making becomes very, very easy, and progress, achievement, and growth accelerates, and it's just a much more pleasing way to live your life.
That's one of the things. When we're problem solving or decision making, these are two skills that are also a muscle. The more we do them, the faster we get. The more we do them, the more confident we can become in choosing something that's going to have the outcome that we want with the least amount of obstacles to get there. So there is something to also practicing those skills. And when you make filters like that, it takes a Googleplex of results and makes it sometimes all the way down to a handful that can then be evaluated. Even if it was 100, then there are some other filters to be put on to get them to a manageable amount of results that each one can be thought about. Because if we stick with the bazillions and bazillions and bazillions because that's anything is possible, the world is my oyster, what do I want in this moment, and just randomly pick one, it may not align with what you were just talking about, with the freedom, with being effective, with being intentional.
I think we tend to complicate things way too much. That's part of the sloppy thinking. I think it's very, very simple. It's hard work to get it simple or to get it clean. If you understand the principle that we live in a what you sow is what you reap world, and we tie that to this idea that what underlies all of our motivation is that this incredible desire to be free, my actions must align with that value, that I want to be free value. Being aware of that and accepting responsibility for it curbs the way that I make decisions and the actions that I take, because I know that I live in a what I sow is what I reap world. So if I want more freedom, what I have to practice doing, Jessica, is I have to practice giving everyone and everything around me the freedom to be what it is, without criticizing it, without judging it, without getting angry at it, without fighting it, because to do so is to deny my own underlying desire to enjoy more freedom than I currently enjoy. And when I help someone else enjoy more freedom in their life, it actually expands mine. When I deny somebody else their freedom, it denies mine, it contracts mine. When I take a position that I hate this frickin' weather and I'm boiling in my blood, I'm literally binding myself up. I'm denying my own freedom by taking that position, because there's nothing that happens in our world that isn't natural.
Exactly. And I have a really good example. I really puzzled somebody yesterday. I wrapped up a client and they are moving on to the next phase of what they're going to do. And somebody was asking me and I said, oh yeah, I've got a really awesome challenge right now. I just wrapped up a client and I am so happy and I feel content that I did everything that I could for this person and they're ready to go out on their own. I've done what I said I was going to do. They feel confident and ready to go do what they need to do, and we'll talk in 6 months and see how it's going. And now I have space for another client. And the response was, oh, so you lost income and need to replace it? And I said, well, that's one way to look at it. A different way to look at it is I have a new challenge and I have the space to face that challenge and put out the invitation that the next person that is exactly ready for what I can offer them is going to show up as long as I'm doing the work to find them. But they're like, well, I never thought about it like that. And I'm like, well, I'm not in it just for the money. I'm in it because I genuinely care. I have a service that will help somebody. And at the same time, that somebody has to be in a place that they're ready to receive what I can offer them.
The mind is a real tricky thing. If we're not very, very careful, we end up with the wrong perspective and we self-inflict and self-injure ourselves as business leaders, as husbands and wives, as fathers, mothers, friends. Here's one example of what I mean that applies directly to the marketplace. And it doesn't matter what your role is. You could be the janitor or you could be the CEO. Mm-hmm. If your perspective is wrong, then the results you get are going to make you and everybody around you miserable. And you and I both know that money does not make us happy. It has nothing to do with our happiness. Money is important because that's what makes the world go around. But money is way, way, way down on the list of things that are really needed to live a happy life. So here's my point, Jessica. A great deal of the population, and I was one of those, and in some ways I still am. I'm working on completely making this shift, but for years and years and years, I had the perspective that, oh my God, I hope this next opportunity or this next prospect is the answer to my prayers, right? Mm-hmm. I hope I can close this deal because whatever, I need groceries, or I need this, or I need that. Or I hope this opportunity doesn't turn into a challenge that I now have to, do war against to overcome.
Right.
When I changed my perspective from that to how can I be the answer to the next person that I encounter's prayers, everything began to change. First thing I noticed was that I became liberated. I became freer. My happiness expanded. We've all carried this hole around in us, right? No matter what we did, it felt like it never got filled.
Yes. Yeah, you're right. We all have something like that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, once I shifted my perspective and I started focusing on the service to others and denied that selfishness on the inside of me to want to have my personal in-the-moment need met, that hole got filled. Mm-hmm. And so everything became more effective as a result. And what I mean by that is that the person that I encountered was left feeling better. It's like I was fuel for their soul. And so they left feeling much better, which meant that the impact that they had on the next people that they encountered was better. And then when I left, because of my service to them, being fuel for their soul, the next persons that encountered me got the effect of that. And so the whole world was made a little better as a result. Mm-hmm. And the more I practiced that, sort of maintaining that perspective, the richer, the more rewarding, the more freedom, the more creativity, all the wonderful things that we need in order to really live a rich life expanded and continue to expand. It's our responsibility to do the hard work of thinking things through so that we could put ourselves in the right mindset to make the right choices and take the right actions to get the results that we want. And the results that we want are what? To be free.
We can only know what we know today. There's no way we can know what tomorrow brings. There's always going to be some level of uncertainty. Yet, when we are making sure that we're using, and I'm going to use the word filters around our values, around our desires, and we're going to stick with freedom, the ultimate desire to be free. If we are making choices and making decisions and solving problems in that way, it's much easier to switch to a service to others type of perspective. So even though that uncertainty is there, we know that whatever comes our way, we can choose to handle it, and we are ready to handle it.
Yeah, whatever comes our way is supposed to come our way, and we're completely equipped to respond to it in a very, very effective way, provided we've done the work to keep our thinking clean. It's when our thinking gets messy or sloppy that we stop responding and start reacting. You know, Stephen Covey, God bless his soul, created an illustration or a framework for seeing this in your mind's eye. Your energy should be directed at the things that you can directly influence. Everything else does not need your energy or your power or your focus, because to give it your energy or your power or your focus is to squander your own genius. You can't do anything about it. When I get upset at the traffic lights for being red, and the guy who cut me off for cutting me off, and my appointment for showing up late, and on and on and on, I'm squandering my energy and my effectiveness and my happiness and my future. When I decide to give all of that the freedom to just be what it is, and to accept it as part of life, and to not judge it and to get bent out of shape about it, then I am able to direct my focus and my energy and my genius at those things that I actually can influence, and do so with all of it instead of a piece of it.
Ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here first from the lips of Les Dossey. We have come to the end of our time today, and I'm so glad. Part of Les being a co-host means he's coming back, and we are going to talk more about this, and we're going to dive into some other areas, because this concept of clean thinking, it sets the stage. It is what is necessary for us to take all of the next steps, and Les is going to be walking us through it, talking with us about it, and I'm going to end this part of the show with a quote from Les right here. We must be willing to do the work to keep our thinking clean. And I'm going to add, because it sums up the rest of the show, and that's how we get contentment in our hearts, that's how we feel fulfilled, and that's how we get the results we want. You will find the program notes for The Freedom of a Leader at thevoiceofboldbusiness.com/p17, or just go to the website, voiceofboldbusiness.com, and search The Freedom of a Leader. We want to know what you think about this. Fill us in. Tell us your stories. What resonates? What do you have questions about? Let us know, and we're going to add to the conversation of what it means to be a leader today using these concepts that you're learning right here. And remember, the time to think and our thinking is what sets the stage for freedom.
Subscribe at thevoiceofboldbusiness.com and get more information, program notes, and past episodes. Bold leaders approach each situation and focus on action to achieve a higher level of leadership. Jessica Dewell, your business advocate, is the host of the Voice of Bold Business Radio. Thank you for joining us.